The use of deception in warfare has a long history, from the Trojan Horse used by the Greeks during the Trojan War, leading to the Greek victory, to Schwarzkopf's fake troop movements and radio transmissions during the Gulf War, leading to the encirclement of the Iraqi army. Deception is an integral part of the military doctrine. The most famous military book ever written, Sun Tzu's The Art of War, emphasizes that it is key to victory, stating in the first chapter that all warfare is based on deception. There are countless other famous uses of deception in war, like Operation Fortitude, where during World War II, the Allies created an entire fake army and tricked the Germans into believing that the invasion of Europe would start at Calais instead of Normandy. But no country in history has ever placed a bigger emphasis on the use of deception than Russia. This Russian doctrine is called Maskirovka. The word most closely translates to the English word disguise or conceal, and technically applies to everything including camouflage, but is used by the West as a label to describe Russia's use of deception. For Russia, this concept is much more than just a warfare tactic. It is an ideology utilized at every aspect of its government. It is used to conceal its true intentions from opponents, whether it be in war, in foreign policy, or even in domestic policy. It can be used in an attempt to influence other countries' foreign and domestic policy, to spread propaganda and promote their nation's ideology, or simply as disinformation to create doubt and distrust of a country's intentions. This tactic was used extensively throughout the Cold War. One famous example was the so-called bomber gap. The Russians made numerous efforts to create the appearance that they had built up a massive number of nuclear-capable bombers. In 1955 at the Soviet Air Show, Russia flew a few of its Bison bombers overhead. Those bombers quickly flew out of sight, looped around, and flew back over again, creating the appearance of dozens of more bombers than they actually had. They also packed all their Bison bombers at an airbase that they knew the Americans would photograph, again giving the appearance of many more bombers than they actually operated. Eventually, further reconnaissance showed that the bomber gap was non-existent, but not before the US spent massive amounts of money building up its own bomber fleet of over 2,000 aircraft. A similar event took place a few years later that became known as the missile gap, which again, after massive spending by the US, the gap turned out to be false. The KGB, the Soviet version of the CIA, took this concept of Maskirovka to a new level. James Jesus Angleton, the famous CIA chief of counterintelligence, described the KGB as a wilderness of mirrors, with deceptions with inside other deceptions. They would even send fake defectors to the US to feed them false information. One notable case of this is with Anatoly Golitsyn and Yuri Nosenko. Both men were KGB, and both claimed to be genuine defectors. Golitsyn defected first, followed shortly by Nosenko. The information that each man gave to the CIA contradicted the others. For this reason, it is believed that one of them was a fake, used by the KGB to discredit the other. James Angleton favored Golitsyn, and the FBI favored Nosenko. To this day, it is still not clear which, if any, was a genuine defector or a double agent. In 1983, the KGB conducted Operation Infecton. The purpose of this campaign was to spread fake information claiming that the United States had invented HIV and AIDS in a lab. The claim was published mostly by communist newspapers and media outlets across 80 different countries. Also, during the Vietnam War, the Soviets spent more than $1 billion on peace movements across the world with the goal of removing public support for the war. The KGB has reportedly helped fund every single anti-war movement during the Cold War to protect communist nations. The KGB used deception so thoroughly that it was reported that after the assassination of President Kennedy, it had to investigate itself to see if they were behind it. Vasily Mitrokhin, a member of the KGB who later defected, claimed that some of the conspiracy theories regarding the assassination were invented and promoted secretly by the KGB in order to create unrest and distrust of the US government and the CIA by its citizens. This practice can also be seen today with President Putin and his administration. It is clear that Russia in some way attempted to tamper and meddle in the 2016 US presidential election. Whether it deliberately worked with Trump to help him win, or whether they just helped to set up meetings in order to give the appearance of collusion to split the American public and cause political unrest is unclear. Whichever is true, it is apparent that they were successful. Another prime example is Ukraine in 2014. Soldiers in green uniforms with no insignias or badges began showing up in the Crimea. Putin first claimed that the soldiers were not Russian. Shortly after annexing Crimea, Putin then admitted that the troops were in fact Russian special forces. Later on, again troops without insignias began showing up in eastern Ukraine. and again, the Russian government claimed that they were not their troops. Several of the soldiers were captured by Ukrainian forces and revealed to be Russian soldiers. The Russian government explained that these men were acting by themselves and not on behalf of Russia, similar to how ex-US soldiers were fighting in Iraq and Syria at the time. While many of their deceptions have been successful, others have not. When Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 was shot down, Russia made several claims, including that it was shot down by a Ukrainian surface-to-air missile site, and then later claiming that a Ukrainian aircraft shot it down, even releasing a doctored satellite image of the alleged event. Right after the US Tomahawk strike on the Syrian base of Shirat, Russia claimed that only 23 of the 59 missiles actually hit the base. This was disproven shortly afterward when satellite imagery of the base revealed 44 distinct targets hit, some more than once. And just recently, the Russian Ministry of Defense released what it claimed was proof that the US was working with ISIS. They released images and video as evidence. These images were actually discovered to be taken from a video game, and others being old footage released by the US military. While deception is practiced by every nation on some level, the Russians have taken it to the next level. They have mastered the use of deception to conceal their true intentions. Maskirovka is applied at every level, to every aspect.